You remember when you were a kid and your parents told you never to talk to strangers, and then at a certain point realize that that's literally impossible, so you're gonna have to figure out how to talk to strangers? Well, today we're talking about how everybody's got a different approach for that. Now, generally speaking, I love talking to strangers. I love hearing people's stories, their perspective, what they like to do, especially when I'm traveling. And more often than not, I would say the interactions are positive. Even if their story's not all that interesting, I still like hearing them. More information is never a bad thing, no matter where you go. There's always bound to be some dicks out there. Of course, this is all pretty subjective, too. We all might have differing opinions on the kind of behavior we find normal or dickish. A story that you may not find all that interesting might blow my tits off. Of course, it's when things aren't so clear-cut that it gets a little bit hard to tell who's a dick and who's not. Now, I'm a huge fan of the author Malcolm Gladwell. I've read basically all of his books, and two that I want to talk about here are called Blink and Talking with Strangers. They both have somewhat of a similar focus, but they sort of approach it from different sides. Blink is a book about the idea of thin slicing, and he basically profiles people who, with very limited time and seemingly limited information, are able to make judgments that are 100% accurate. For example, at one point he highlights a car salesman who has the ability within the first minute of talking to somebody if they're going to buy or not. And he makes the case that it's not so much the volume of people this guy's talked to over the years, it's more so that he has honed in on the one or two key predictors of whether or not somebody's going to buy. Talking with Strangers, on the other hand, is basically a series of examples of, well, how we as people are, generally speaking, really bad judges of character. Be it how often we ignore certain red flags to let people get away with things, giving them the benefit of the doubt, how we hone in on things that aren't really all that important, that can end up making us really wrong about somebody or even causing harm to that person. Myself, I try to live somewhere in the middle, where I look for key indicators of what I perceive to be red flags, but also understanding that while I try to put my best foot forward, still being authentic to myself, other people don't always do that. But why do I bring any of this up? Well, it goes back to me playing golf yesterday. As I was playing by myself, I got paired up with a random person, and that happens all the time, and most of the time it's fine. Of course, yesterday I got paired up with a guy who was super arrogant, started off the whole day by saying, "How far you think you can hit?" which is energy that I don't respond well to. And then even throughout the course of the day, had a couple bad shots, he's laughing at me, despite the fact that he lost more balls than I can count. I didn't say shit about that. And I cut this out of yesterday's video, but we were shaking hands and he said to me, "I'd say you did all right." And he said it as if I was like looking for his approval of how well I did. So let's blink and talk with strangers at this. On the Blink side of things, I had no idea who this guy was, and I only spent a few hours with it. But in that amount of time, I was able to pick up on some red flags that lead me to believe that he's kind of a dick. On the Talking with Strangers side of things, I only have the information that he's presenting to me to go based on. If he was indeed posturing out of some kind of insecurity and trying to make some kind of joke, I really have no way of knowing that. And because it's not illegal to be a dick, while I don't like the personality traits that he chose to put out there as his first impression, I don't want to vilify the guy either. I've also met plenty of other people in the same context that I met this guy, and they were nice enough. So it's not just the situation. He does have some hand in it. And in the end, I'll never know. But I always try to keep in mind that for every less than ideal interaction, there's probably a dozen good ones out there. I'll never stop talking to strangers and trying to figure people out. I'll tell you who's not a stranger is that lady right there. I'm gonna go say hi. I'll see you tomorrow.